you're facing joblessness and rising costs of living, disruption to your daily life. If you're in the Philippines, you may not get steady electricity supply. Everything's going to go up. The longer this goes on, the worse it's going to get. It is scary. If you are low wage, particularly, I think it's quite a scary time. What's beginning to come up among some of the VC investors, particularly in the UAE now, is once this war ends, the things that are of most concern for a lot of these VCs as well is how can we integrate defense and security into our mandates.
Welcome to Brave. Learn from Southeast Asia's best tech leaders. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. No BS on success. I'm Jeremy Au, venture capitalist, serial founder, Harvard MBA, science fiction nerd, and dad of 2 daughters. Every week, we debate startup news, interview changemakers, answer listener questions, and share personal insights. Join our movement of over 40,000 members and get transcripts, resources, and community at www.bravesea.com. Stay well and stay brave.
Hey, good to see you.
Yes, I'm back.
Congratulations on your new gig.
Thank you. So I just joined PitchBook
Yeah.
as their first editorial hire here in Asia. So I'm
Fantastic.
actually their Asia editor. Basically, we're a data intelligence platform for private markets.
Yeah.
So, I mean, simply put, if Bloomberg is like the data intelligence platform for public markets, we do private markets. The Singapore APAC office is slightly over 3 years old.
Yeah.
And now we've come to the stage where like having, established a sales team and a product team, we're starting to beef up our research team, me doing editorial and marketing. So really kind of ramping up our presence here.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Kristie Neo used to be the person going to Accra to find out
Yeah,
everybody's news. And now
Oh my gosh.
we're going to turbocharge you with
dear
PitchBook.
me. Yes,
You are
yeah,
going
I know.
to be insane. You're going to be like the
Well, yeah,
superwoman.
the first thing I did was I actually looked into the PitchBook platform and like trying to figure out like, okay, what data do we actually have now? Because all this time I never had any access to the data. And now I'm like, wow, you guys are really underutilizing your algorithm.
You're
Guys,
like-
you should be like updating this thing.
Wait, you're like District Asia, you couldn't afford a PitchBook
No,
license?
because it's really expensive. And I know a lot of people complain about like how expensive PitchBook subscription
So
is.
do you have like a free
No,
PitchBook subscription for
I
me?
don't run this company. I'm just the editorial person. So yeah, I just write stories. And if you want to take a subscription, you talk to my sales guy. I exit the convo.
That's the
Yeah.
point, right? Which is
Yeah.
I read an article, I was like, oh, okay, there'll be some
Yeah.
hyperlink, I'll click
Yeah,
on
yeah,
it,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
it's like, oh, I gotta buy this subscription. No!
Yeah. So that's
Okay,
what
all
it
right,
is.
that's okay.
Yeah.
I'll use alternatives.pe.
Oh no.
Buy Jason Edwards. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Go
That's the
ahead.
cheaper version.
Go ahead. Yeah, true.
So, there you are, your PitchBook, and obviously a lot of things have happened since our last podcast. I think one big news, obviously, is the entire Middle East crisis.
Yeah,
You were based there for quite some time.
Yeah, about 1.5 years. I mean, really kind of went by. I think the last time I came on your podcast, I was still in Dubai.
Yeah, exactly. And none of this news was no prediction. Nobody was thinking this was going to happen. So let me quickly recap what has happened. But I think we're thinking more about the future and what's implications. The US, Israel, and Iran have come to blows, right? Currently, there's a ceasefire while negotiations are happening.
Yep.
But in effect, there's a blockade of the Straits of Hormuz where neither Iranian oil or GCC oil is coming out through tanker via the Straits of Hormuz, and Philippines has declared a national fuel emergency, the first one to declare in the world, and rightfully so, I would say. I think it was prescient of them, I would say, courageous of them, but it's not to say like Taiwan, Japan, Korea, Thailand, and Indonesia is not. All of us need energy.
With the exception of Malaysia, I think they're a net oil exporter.
And Brunei,
Yeah.
so
They're doing okay.
and Sabah, Sarawak are okay,
All
fine.
the rest of us are.
All the rest of us are like, please,
Yeah.
we need air conditioning and
Yeah.
and oil and energy and gas to even do stir fry
Yeah.
our dishes and stuff like that. I mean, and of course Europe also is having a little bit of energy crisis because they've been split off from Russian oil and gas for a while, and now also from the Middle East. So there's a little bit where we are today. Obviously things may change tomorrow, who knows, right?
Yeah.
Maybe by tomorrow everything is solved, but I'm just kind of curious, what's your sense, what's underreported about the news? Yeah.
Well, I mean, Wow, where do I even begin? How many months has it been now? Now we're in April. So
Yeah.
I think started in February.
Yeah, 3 months
For
past. Yeah.
some strange reason, it feels like it's much longer than that. But I mean, I think all of us can agree that the longer this continues, it's not going to get any better. And I think the pressure to be able to end this war on all sides, right, whether you're US or Iran and everyone else, stakeholders in this equation, especially in the Middle East, is just going to get higher and higher. The optimistic side to it is at least now there are conversations about a ceasefire, even though it's a bit of like on off type of conversations. But if you rewind to just a month ago, none of that was happening at all. And like the first month, everyone was just like trading blows, right? Like literally, I tell everybody, like every single country in the Middle East has gotten hit, from as far away as Turkey and Azerbaijan, and even like Cyprus, like for goodness sake, like every single one, and Iran and Israel, like everybody. So yeah, well, one can only hope that this ends very, very quickly, because it's obviously turning out to be a very costly affair for the UAE particularly. Like this is very costly because, you know, they're very dependent on specific sectors that are tied to the global macro, whether it's like aviation or maritime, right? Tourism is still a really huge industry. I think we're beginning to see, there are some news reports that are coming up on property prices beginning to show some signs of correction. Still early days, and there will be a lag because it's real estate, it's not like liquid markets. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that continues to trend moving forward. There have been some people leaving in the Middle East, and it really depends on who you're talking to. Again, like take into account the fact that media is very much controlled in the Gulf. There's definitely been a rise in patriotism for sure.
Right.
Everybody's kind of like, you know, when someone attacks you, right? Like someone attacks Singapore as well, all the Singaporeans are going to be like up in arms, like, how dare you, you know, we are proud to be from this country, la la la. So I think also what's beginning to come up among some of the VC investors, particularly in the UAE now, is once this war ends, the things that are of most concern for a lot of these VCs as well is how can we kind of integrate defense and security into our mandates. I think in the past, we saw a lot of these like B2C, B2B type, you know, sector businesses that were really riding on like consumer focused trends, right? Because it is still a high growth region. Now, you know, defense, security is definitely a huge part because of the equation now, because UAE, the safe haven of the Middle East, even they could get attacked as well. So definitely, I think there's been a shift in that part of the psyche. And yeah, I just spoke to one VC who was actually visiting Singapore. He's based in the UAE, and he was like, yeah, my team and I were actually brainstorming about how we can include this in our mandate moving forward. What this means for the Middle East venture landscape there, very, very uncertain. My assumption is I think it's going to be pretty tough. I think definitely when it comes to fundraising, it's going to be challenging, because I think this was maybe like a month ago when I was starting to talk to some of them. I know a lot of the VCs were starting to kind of give a bit of a briefing to their portfolio companies, advising them that you need to start ramping up your cash runway now. Like in the past, if it was like 12 or 18 months, make sure it's 24 months plus taxes. The more the better, right? Because we just don't know. First of all, we don't know how long this is going to last. And while we, the VCs, do have dry powder to deploy, they themselves cannot be certain whether or not they have enough dry powder for themselves and for the LPs, which, you know, predominantly come from the sovereign wealth funds. First of all, there's a deficit for some of these countries. Number two, a lot of this money is being set aside for emergency measures, right? Emergency response. There's a lot of the monies that have been dedicated to that. Is tax still an important part of that equation, and how much can they set aside to allocate for VCs? Question mark. So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of uncertainty. We did see a number of people, this is where the media coverage tends to be a little bit like a bit mixed. Like you do see the initial stages, I think in Singapore, all the RSAF plays, bring our Singaporeans home, blah, blah. A lot of crazy stories about people trying to get out. I think, and the concept there is that, you know, last in, first out, right? So people who moved there in the last like 1 to 2 years, a lot of those guys have already left. The influencers have all left and gone to Bali and these places. The people who are committed to the region, those guys are staying and they're still there. So yeah, we're definitely experiencing quite a bit of that. Hopefully second half of this year, maybe there's a bit more clarity on that front over there. But in terms of like the ramifications, as you say, for like Asia, oil prices, we are unfortunately dependent on oil prices. I think Malaysia is one of the very few countries here that, you know, is a net oil exporter as opposed to a net oil importer, which means inflationary effects are just going to keep going out through the roof. I think we've really seen like all these Grab Gojek riders, right? I think Anthony Tan put out a note maybe 2-3 weeks ago, saying like we are in active conversations to try to find ways to help our drivers be able to cope with the price increases. But the longer this goes on, the worse it's going to get. And it is scary. I think it's a very scary time to be. If you are a low wager particularly, I think it's quite a scary time. And with all this AI disruption and joblessness and big tech companies cutting off massive portions of their labor, you're facing joblessness and rising costs of living, disruption to your daily life depending on which city you're in. If you're in the Philippines, you may not get steady electricity supply. Everything's going to go up. I mean, food prices, everything. So
Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing a lot of impacts, right? I mean, for example, my friend, he runs a shawarma chain in the Philippines, and for him, his perspective is foot traffic has gone down because people are starting to work from home to conserve on gas, but also on his own side, cost of energy is going up, and I think soon we'll start to see the impact of fertilizer prices will impact food, etc. So I think it's really tough for, you can imagine, like a lot of your F&B, which are so exposed to these primary inputs, it can be a big problem. So I think that's one kind of like canary in the coal mine. I would say a bunch of impacts in my head, just to list them off in bullet points. Flights obviously are starting to go down both in Europe and Asia. Connectivity is tough in Asia because you fly, there's not like a high-speed rail between Singapore to KL to Thailand, right? You got to fly. So flights are starting to go down.
The prices of these tickets are going up too.
Exactly.
Probably low frequency of flights and higher prices.
Which is going to impact tourism as well. Singapore is a refinery hub. We're so brave. We have a WhatsApp group community, and we had a bit of a discussion, but the refinery hub status of Singapore is already under threat because of Singapore's a net zero pledge, which means that they're not as favorable to the refinery hub business, combined with some requirements around moving towards EVs away from internal combustion and taxes and things like that, has really made refining difficult for the multinational corporations. So they've been slowly divesting the assets to the Indonesians and regional players. So there's really a slow motion thing that happened. But now, of course, with this double whammy of both lower oil and gas volumes going through Singapore, which impacts that, but also a bigger sense that maybe the world has to accelerate renewables faster, makes this transition for Singapore as a refinery hub, as a economy driver, a bit of a tricky inflection point.
Yeah. But like just continuing with that particular point, I do think it's going to be interesting to see how the conversation around renewables and green technology is going to evolve. Because obviously now with this energy crunch that, especially among nations that are very coal and oil and gas kind of dependent, right? The supply chain for a lot of these renewables, whether it's solar or wind or whatever, has always been, I guess we've always had investments in some of these areas, but I'm sure that governments will be more incentivized now than ever to try to kind of get those pieces going now, right? Because now we know that we can never ever be sure that we have energy, steady energy, like, all through the year. So yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see like how that evolves, that piece evolves.
Yeah, it's an all-time high now.
Well, the odd thing is that, since Trump came around, like there's been no conversation on green green investments. And yet in Asia, I find that we are still talking about it. And I think for perhaps this is one of the reasons why, because of what's been happening in this Middle East war, and these needs are still there, and there's a lot more room and opportunity to accelerate that green climate transition. So yeah, I think in that sense, maybe there's something optimistic to kind of look towards.
Yeah, I think ESG has gone away, but energy security, energy independence, and green energy, I mean, those are three different ways to describe it, but as of today, they have aligned, right? And so I think it's an all-time high for solar cell imports of Chinese solar cells to Philippines, to Southeast Asia, all-time high. All-time high for EV car purchases. Nobody's buying internal combustion today because everybody feels like gas prices are going to keep going up. And most of those cars being bought are BYD or Chinese, I would say, as well. Vietnam just said they're going to go nuclear for the first time, which was a big shock, I think, because Southeast Asia has no nuclear energy, but they were the first, and they're going to go with a Russian nuclear power plant.
Okay.
Which makes sense. I mean, from a geopolitical security perspective, if they went Chinese, the Americans would be unhappy, and if they went American, the Chinese would be unhappy. So I guess they went with the Russians. But I'm just saying, they did go nuclear, which is a big step. Call it breaking the taboo. I don't know what you call it, but it definitely sets a precedent within ASEAN that nuclear energy could be something that could happen in Southeast Asia.
Yeah. I was talking to, I don't know if you know Circulate Capital, but they basically, it's a fund here that actually focuses on recycled plastics. And even he was also telling me that, all his portfolio companies, so they invest in emerging Asia, so India, Southeast Asia. A lot of his portfolio companies are completely sold out because what has turned out is because of the war, the cost of recycled plastics now is just so much cheaper than virgin plastic. So he sees that this is going to be a long-term trend where the demand for getting that local ecosystem for local recycling is just going to continue. It's not going to be a one-off thing. So yeah, all of these parts, these little bits, I think is in a way is a good thing for Asia.
Yeah, I mean, it's all mixed, right? Because I invested in Recosystem, which does recycled plastic recycling, and that's up. But then we also do Iritani, which is doing rice agriculture, which is highly dependent on fertilizer and fuel, right, for farming. So, it's a very mixed bag, for Southeast Asia. But
Trying to be an investor, I think.
it's a tough time because things can change so quickly, right? And then also, I think, like you said, I think a lot of Southeast Asia VC funds were, previously had looked at US LPs, let's say 10 years ago. And I'll say 5 years ago, started pivoting, pushing towards the Middle East as LPs. But now,
I think they try. I don't know if a lot of them actually raised successfully.
yeah, exactly. They don't sell. They can walk in the doors. The joke I remember I heard from one of them was like they went to the meeting and then they met all the other Southeast Asians because all the GPs were all like not. And obviously from an LP perspective, they want to queue them up back to back so they can make a decision. So they're all like coming in and out of the same building and staying roughly in the same hotels and bars, and so they kind of knew all of them were also in Dubai or Riyadh at the same time. But definitely I feel like that's much more unlikely now. Because I think we just saw like recently even the Saudi Arabians, they used to be funding the golf competitor LIV versus PGA. And they just said, you know what, we're not going to underwrite this golf competition because it's no longer core versus, like you said, right, their core projects, their core defense, their core liquidation needs they needed to have to fund their current economy today. So what is Southeast Asia?
I mean, I think that, the interesting thing about that is, and I think in a way, whenever war happens, I think it forces governments to kind of like look inward because you're forced to kind of reinvest into things that are kind of crucial to your national security, like whether it's, defense, whether it's cyber, whether it's energy, whether it could be all of these things. And I think in a way, I mean, you could argue that it is the one thing that is holding the Middle East back because it's such a conflict-prone region. And the reason why it is so insular and remains so insular to this day is because of this. And now that we see this war again, it's like, I think you can only imagine, I guess, in the minds of LPs, like, yes, we knew that this was a conflict zone. And even though you were the UAE and you were the safe haven, even you could get bombed too. And I think that's kind of, in a way, quite sad because I think the last few years has been really great years for the UAE. There's a bit of a question mark in terms of like how far this is going to affect that safe haven status that they have spent so many years trying to build, right? I don't think people also realize, and I don't know if you know this as well, but like this attack on UAE is really, truly unprecedented. Like as a nation, and they've been around for, how old are they now? I think they've been around since the 90s. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it could be 1950s or 60s.
After World War II, the decolonization wave.
Yeah, exactly. Since they became independent, they have never been attacked like this, never. So as a nation, they have never experienced war like this, So to suddenly experience this is like, what is going on? So you can only imagine what kind of shift this country is going to experience once this war ends, which hopefully will be sooner rather than later. I tell everyone this, and I really truly believe, like, I think this nation will come out a lot stronger after this because when people go through periods of crisis and war, it really forges a lot of unity. When I talk and I hear, read comments from people who've been living there, and there are so many people there who have lived there for a decade and more. These are people who came from UK, and recently there have been a couple of Russians, Ukrainians, African people, Filipinos, so many Filipinos there. And they go there and they've been able to feed their families because of the opportunities that the UAE has given to them. And because of this crisis, now they're like, I'm here to stay. I'm not here. I'm not going to move back, because this is my country. And they've done so much to protect me and my family. And even though they don't even have citizenship status, this sense of national loyalty is even stronger than ever before. So yeah, it's a very interesting thing to see and witness. And I really do think they're going to come out a lot stronger after this. But it's going to take a bit of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, and this is actually coming from you, but you were saying like earlier before the conversation that this conflict really puts a strain on everything that Dubai, is great at, right? It's been great for tourism as a flight hub in terms of oil and gas production and export. So much of it is effectively at a standstill today because of this current conflict. And I think it's a good reminder to every country. It's like without security, you can't be a you can't be a finance hub.
No.
You can't be a trading hub.
No.
I mean, I always tell people it's like London wanted to be the Singapore of Europe. And this was under Brexit, there was a bit of that claim there. And I guess at least you can make an argument that Singapore and London to date have been historically secure, right? And I think
Or Switzerland and Singapore. Yeah.
Switzerland and Singapore is
Yeah.
another angle.
Yeah.
But Dubai needs security in order to be able to have those Singapore functions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, you just get bullied or threatened or blockaded or sanctioned, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a crazy situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in a lot of ways, for now at least, I think Singapore definitely stands to benefit a lot from the uncertainties that you're seeing in the Middle East and everywhere else around the world. There were a couple of reports, if you recall, about capital flight, like coming out of the Gulf. I do think it was a little bit misrepresented, to be very honest. I mean, I think if anything, probably it would be hedge funds or like more like cash outflows, maybe families who are kind of like moving their cash out. It's liquid because these are liquid assets. It's not like you can just overnight say, I want to sell my property and someone else is going to pick it up. Of course, and back to where we were talking about earlier, in terms of real estate prices, yes, I think we're going to see a bit of a downtrend for those types of assets for sure. But these families or hedge funds, all these big GPs who opened offices in Dubai, right, or Abu Dhabi over the last 2 years, are they actively looking to leave? That's a bit of I would say, still a bit of a question mark. I mean, it's a bit of a mix. I've been asking people this as well, like recently, like, are they looking to stay? Are they looking to go? And it so far seems like a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, definitely a bit of a wait and see approach, depending on how soon things kind of clear up. But I mean, I've heard both. I've heard of both looking to stay or wait, and also heard of some cases where, say, Gulf families looking to, how do you say, open up parallel structures.
Resilience,
Singapore. Yes,
diversification,
exactly, diversification.
so that if business can't happen in one place, they still can keep going and still move money in and out or move.
Which, I mean, the diversification play has been going on for a while now, but if anything, because of the war, it will probably just accelerate the urgency of wanting to do it. And Asia has always been the place where it's better than putting money in Europe and US, which is low growth. In Asia, it's still high growth. It's just that it's a region that they're still getting to know. So, yeah, and if you're a big institutional investor, there are benefits to accelerating that diversification play. So I do think this will probably continue. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that shapes up. Yeah, if anything, the Gulf Asia Connect will probably grow over time.
I agree with you that a lot of infrastructure is going to get replicated in Singapore. So family offices and capital to allow some level of stuff to happen. But I think we also see some parallels. I think that Singapore, a lot of people I know are starting to focus also on defense tech as well. I think there's a very similar set of national security constraints that where Singapore feels like it could be blockaded, by the Straits of Malacca. Part where it was like, hey, Indonesia minister was like, hey, would it be nice if we we got a toll from people going through through the straits, and then the next day the Straits of Singapore and Malaysia both came out to say we disagree. So I was like, wow, Singapore and Malaysia agreed on something. For once, right? So at least it was like, okay, and obviously I think we all had a meeting after that, and they kind of came out to say like, okay, status quo and everything. But I think there's a lot of focusing on minds in Singapore that some of Singapore's like strategy around like defense is a bit similar to the traditional approach of like ships, tanks, soldiers that may not be as resilient in like a blockade or kind of situation. So there's been, I think, some interesting talk that I'm hearing about defense tech also getting added as a portfolio
I
important.
feel like, hasn't Singapore always been investing in our defense tech? I mean, if we're talking about the maritime play, I think all this conversation about nuclear in Singapore, then I think, to be honest, that conversation is an old conversation. But I just think that people are actually talking about it now because maybe the government is actually more serious about it now than before. So there's a bit of a resurgence of that and the complications of having to build nuclear capacity in this tiny little island. Because it's true, if there is a blockade, what are we going to do?
Switch on the nuclear power plant. That would be the white paper that we came out about whether it's safe or not and everything. I think it's just more like drones are like an intermediate technology that has some sliding scale of capability manufacturing. I think it's interesting. I mean, obviously Singapore signed a civilian nuclear safety engineering agreement with the Biden administration, which still is ongoing, and bringing in students now to start training them on nuclear safety and engineering, etc. But yeah, I think it definitely is a big question in people's head. I would say I'm hearing rumblings now, defense tech is increasing as a portfolio. I think part of it is because, and this is something that we've speculated on the podcast before, but technically Singapore has a lot of every Singaporean male goes through military service. So they kind of understand requirements, in terms of sales, engineering. There's a high engineering competency and high education base and manufacturing base in Singapore. Yeah. But I think it's just that historically Singapore has been a peacetime military that has done a really good job of diplomacy. Yes. To not feel like defense tech was needed to be an investment portfolio. But I do hear that there's a rumbling in terms of increased focus.
Meaning among the VCs here, or?
I think both VCs as well as like people who are on the LP side is just saying like, okay, what does defense tech look like? Is that a viable thesis? Yeah. What kind of teams would be underwritten? How would a startup that comes out of Singapore, how would it be differentiated against an American provider versus a Chinese provider versus a Korean provider? Yeah. Because ST Kinetic is pretty big in Singapore as well. Yeah.
Interesting that your contacts are saying this. I'm also curious to see how that could be actually incorporated, at least among our local VC ecosystems. I mean, to begin with, I think the deep tech and defense tech ecosystem in Singapore, well, most places, it's quite different from your SaaS, BGC, those types of plays, right? They're completely different ecosystems, completely different. Everything is different, right? So you do need a whole different set of networks and thought process around it.
Yeah, it's very different because you need to have capital intensity. It's going to be a long underwriting. The payoff curve is asymmetric in the sense that conflict is good for business and peacetime is going to be a flat line or plateau. So how do you underwrite a business that's based on anti-fragility, right? Versus...
No, but I think the second part to that question, to that whole conversation also is actually, Singapore has also kind of fashioned itself, at least on a defense point of view, after Israel, which I think every military person in Singapore knows that quite well. And one of the reasons why Israel has been so resilient and so vibrant as a VC ecosystem as well is because of its military. So many of the best startups that came out of Israel were spin-offs from the military arm. So they have their own like tech arms as well. So once they build something and then they spin something off, and then they tie up with the new universities. Actually, Singapore does hold some of those pieces as well, but you really haven't seen a lot of these spin-offs. I mean, people will say like, oh yeah, there's ST, like, yeah, I know there's ST, but have we actually seen, in a big way, in a ground-up way, where these interesting cybersecurity startups came out of literally our MINDEF. And now with this conversation on dual use technology and stuff like that, there's a lot more capacity to do that sort of stuff now. Yeah, so outside of the ST bubble, the question is, can we cultivate that in our ecosystem? I think will be an interesting piece to see because I think it can be done.
I am somebody who has a lot to say about how we can improve spin-off and IP licensing in Singapore. I have a lot to say. But that has to be saved for our future episode that we have to do. Yeah. On that note, thank you so much for sharing your point of view, and hopefully things will be better in time to come.
Yeah, maybe in the next episode, hopefully things will be better, then we'll have something to say about it then.
What if it's worse? Okay, on that note, let's wrap up this episode.
Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. We would also appreciate you leaving a rating or review. Head over to www.bravesea.com for member content, resources, and community. Stay well and stay brave.